Hello, and welcome to our next NAP. NAP stands for Nonprofit Auditors Point, and I'm your nonprofit auditor. My name is Irina Orshkova, and I'm happy to chat with you with some accounting and auditing issues that hopefully will be helpful for nonprofit community. Thank you so much once again, and let's talk today about in-kind donations for nonprofit organizations. Specifically, what they are, why they are critical, and I mean critical, not just important, and what nonprofits should not do when writing thank you letters for in-kind donations. Let's start. First of all, let's overview what is in-kind donations. In-kind donations, it's typically three types. Would be professional services for which nonprofit otherwise have to pay, in-kind goods, supplies, tables, chairs, furniture, software, and below fair market value or free rents. And most likely you aware of those three type donations that we called in-kind in nonprofits. Let's just very quickly describe what they are. Professional services. They have to be provided by professional person who has a profession in that area, and they are otherwise have to be purchased by the organization. Typical professional services would be audit, CPA services, consulting, financial consulting, professional fundraiser, attorneys, legal advices, architectural services, and other professional services. When we're talking about otherwise have to be purchased by the organization, the test here is not to say can nonprofit afford it or not. It's more like if nonprofit needed this kind of service. I will give you an example. If nonprofit has a special event and famous person came just to perform an event because that person knows somebody inside the organization and decided to stop by and give a performance, it does not mean necessarily that nonprofit will need to recognize that as in-kind service, because it was not necessary for nonprofit specifically to purchase this kind of service from that famous person. But the nonprofit can exercise some subjectivity and document why they decided otherwise not to record this professional service. In-kind goods. In-kind goods could be a lot of various things, and nonprofit need to keep track of all in-kind donations. If they come, in my practice, we've seen Christmas decorations, paintings, houses, equipment, buildings, land, various supplies, medical supplies, school supplies, office supplies, computers, and etc. So all of these in-kind goods, they have to be recorded at fair market value at the time of donation. So whatever goods, cost of the goods can be assessed, they need to be recorded as a fair market value. Typically, donor will not provide you fair market value. That should come from the management. Management needs to use online resources, some best estimates available to assess maybe like repurchase value if you will buy similar items on the platforms such as eBay and so forth. Management have to come up with fair market value for goods. And the last is free rent or rent that is given at discount, meaning below fair market value. For example, if your nonprofit have event and somebody gave you facility to use for the event free of charge, that you need to recognize fair market value of that facility to be as in-kind donation. If your nonprofit received rent but below what normally would be paid for, because again, maybe lender either wants to support nonprofit this way, or lender was asked to donate partially rent in kind. So the difference between whatever was paid by nonprofit and fair market value should be recognized as in kind. Typically, nonprofits have to give a thank you letter for donors for their donations, and a lot of nonprofits do, and it's a good practice. And a lot of donors use that letter to file their own taxes. I am, as an auditor, often asked what value we need to write on a thank you letter for in-kind donation, and the answer is no value. Because the fair market value that we use as accountants for accounting, and it's under GAAP, under general accepted accounting rules, it's a fair market value. There are some other methods can be used to assess in-kind donations, and individual donors do not use fair market value. They used cost method, meaning how much it costs for a donor. Let me give you a very vivid example that will indicate you the difference between cost basis and fair market value. Again, in books for accounting, we use fair market value. And individual taxpayers use cost basis. For example, if I am a donor and I received something, let's just assume I have somebody who gave me a beautiful gift. For Christmas, let's just assume it was a coffee machine. And it was a gift, but I don't need a coffee machine. I have a machine, and I decided to donate it to a nonprofit. So for me, my cost basis is zero because I did not pay for that coffee machine. Out of pocket, I have no expenses, I don't have a receipt. So I go to the nonprofit that I want to support and I donate that machine. And for example, let's just assume it was an expensive machine. It costs $300, fair market value. It's a new machine, or even if it was used, the nonprofit can assess fair market value. So nonprofit would recognize in-kind donation for that coffee machine, $300. For me, its value is zero. I will not be able to deduct anything on my tax return. Therefore, if nonprofit would write $300 on a thank you letter, it might confuse the donor, and donor would assume that I'm a donor, can deduct $300 on my tax return as a charitable contribution. And if I do, that's wrong. But worst case scenario, if I will be audited by the IRS, and IRS will come and see, ma'am, can we please see your receipts for that donation? And I will say, I don't have a receipt, it was a gift. And but I do have a letter from nonprofit, and I will show them a letter. And the IRS gonna refuse that letter because that's not a support for the IRS. So they said, we need to see a receipt that you spent $300. And I'm gonna say, I didn't. The IRS will disallow that deduction, and we will recalculate my tax liability and might ask additional tax payments because I included some deduction that I was not entitled to. So, and I would be very unhappy, and I will run to nonprofit and I will tell them, you deceived me. You gave me the letter for $300 deduction. So to summarize, when donor give you in-kind donation, please give them a letter, thank you letter, but outline individual items that were donated. Do not put value. It's a job of the individual taxpayers to assess the value of their donation. They will be assessing on a cost basis. You will be assessing on a fair market value. Additionally, couple things, very common misconceptions that I've heard from many nonprofits regarding in-kind. And I wanna explain if they're true or not true. Number one, in-kinds are not important. they just fake number. So we decided not to record because it's in and out, revenue and expenses. For example, we received in-kind legal services for $100,000 and in-kind expenses, legal expenses, $100,000. Why would we bother to record it? That's very incorrect. And the reason is everything in and out, all revenue and then expenses eventually in and out, then it doesn't, in that philosophy, we don't need to record any revenue and expenses, which is wrong. In-kind donations for nonprofits amount about 10% of all revenue. So it's pretty material for industry overall. And if you do not record in-kind revenue, your nonprofit might miss very significant compliance issues. For example, in California, if nonprofit revenue above $2 million, you have to do financial audit. So if 30% of your revenue comes from in-kind, or 80% in that matter, that resulted you for understatement revenue that brings your revenue below $2 million, you actually will not be required to do audit incorrectly. So you do need to do audit because all revenue needs to be recorded. Again, in-kind revenue as important as any other type of revenue. Another very common misconception: in-kind expenses not important. Why we should bother to record them? Again, if your nonprofit receives a lot of in-kind services, professional, which is program in nature. For example, your nonprofit provides legal services and a lot of attorney volunteer their time to provide these kind of services. These are for program expenses. So if you don't record them, that your program expenses will be significantly understated and statement of functional expenses will not show proper picture of your operations. In the same matter, if you have substantial administrative services donated, such as professional fundraiser, or maybe even your executive director is professional volunteer and receive in-kind, provides in-kind services, then your admin expenses will be not correctly stated in a statement of functional expenses. To summarize, in-kind revenue and expenses as important as any contributions, and law allows to receive in-kind services specifically for nonprofits. And a lot of nonprofits supported by donors, not by dollar, but in kind, but it's also equivalent of the dollar. Because eventually nonprofits do take that dollar and spend for services or goods or rents. So there is no different how nonprofit is supported, by in-kind or by cash. All of it needs to be recorded on the books. Thank you so much. Hopefully it was helpful. Thank you, and I will looking forward to see you for the next nap. Be safe and have a wonderful day.